cosmic consciousness, extraterrestrials and UFOs, sacred geometry, ancient civilizations, spiritual connection, the quantum universe. All of these topics and so much more with your host, Sev Tuck, on Alien Spirit with Sev.
Hello, welcome to Alien Spirit. I'm Sev, and I'm very happy to be talking with the very multi-talented Chris Jordan. Chris is the founder of Curious Research. It's an organization whose mission is to help unite the research of traditional science with fringe sciences, such as UFOlogy and cryptozoology and parapsychology. Chris created the Field Observation and Encounter Log, made specifically for paranormal, cryptic, and UFO field researchers to standardize their field data. I know Chris through his show Curious Realm, where he was kind enough to have me as a guest a few times. And Chris and his guests discuss topics related to science, technology, history, culture. Chris also takes his show on the road. He broadcasts live from the Mufon conferences and various other paranormal type conferences. Plus, Chris is a musical composer. His newest album is Experiencer, Music for Targeted Minds, Volume 2. It's designed to help relieve PTSD of contactees and others who have had supernatural or paranormal experiences. He incorporates binaural beats and pure tone therapy. He creates music for meditation and interdimensional travel. Chris has been a live audio-video engineer for over 20 years. He owns Curious Events, providing audio and video production to a variety of conferences around the country. Welcome to one of the nicest guys around, Chris Jordan.
Hey, Sev. Thank you so much.
Hi.
I am beaming, quite literally.
Yeah. Purple. You're beaming purple.
That's right.
All right, let's begin with where you grew up and what were you interested in as a young man?
You know, I grew up in the east side of Houston, Texas. Pretty country until I was probably about 4 or 5 years old when we moved to the west side, which was the suburbs of Houston. And my whole life, I have been fascinated by esoteric topics of one sort or another. That and electronics. When I was probably about 7, my dream was to be a farming inventor. Who went to Harvard.
Your dream was to be
I wanted to live on a farm, just farm and make inventions. And that was it. That's all I wanted to do. That's all I wanted to do. When I was 7 years old, that was my dream job.
Okay, well, what talked you out of it?
I wouldn't say it has talked me out of it, Sev. I actively got to a point, and I remember it was probably 2012. I started a side business here in Austin, home of music in Texas. As you can see here, I have tons of music equipment. But I started a business doing pedal modifications and designing my own circuits. So literally it all came full circle once I became an adult and started designing my own circuits and my own equipment and things like that. So I am an inventor. Like I make tons of my own stuff regularly. I make toys for my son out of electronics, all kinds of things. So do I have things out on market? Absolutely not. But do I use that inventive spirit and make things out of nothing? Pretty regularly. So
yes, and you're very good at it.
Well, thank you.
Because your whole electronic business and all that, well, I don't know if you call it electronic, your audio video production, to me looks like an impossible thing to do. So I really admire that you do that. I've seen you in action and it's pretty impressive. You also travel a lot. What are some of the shows that you do?
Most of the shows that I do as far as professionally are in the medical realm, high data, things like that. A lot of them are algorithmic conferences, companies that write algorithms, do algorithms, AI, that kind of stuff, and AI implementation in workspaces. That's what I do corporate audio video for a living, and that's what I travel with clients to do. But the conferences that I travel for personally and that I cover are everything under the sun when it comes to paranormal, Sev. Everything from Texas Bigfoot Conference to Mufon to International Remote Viewing Association. I co-sponsored the IANS conference, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, with the Bigelow Institute in 2022. That one blew my mind. That on screen, the sponsor slides were me and the Bigelow Institute next to each other. It was like, whoa, I've arrived. But yeah, it's something that audio video just kind of runs through my blood. It's what I love doing. I do it in my spare time when I'm not doing it for clients. It is just an all-around obsession in a way that, I guess, a different way that I view the world at large. You know, whenever I go somewhere, it's a filter that I look at the world through.
It's the logical side of your brain is really strong, but so is the other side of your brain.
Absolutely.
And did you realize that you had psychic abilities, or are you an experiencer? Were you having supernatural and paranormal events as you were growing up?
I had at least what I would consider to be two very specific paranormal events in my younger life. One of them was the event that I've been a very spiritual person my whole life. I was brought up Roman Catholic, ended up following a course that led me into the Catholic seminary my first year in college. After that, I spent years as a youth minister and years teaching Catholic catechism, probably about a decade of my life doing that, working with everybody from ages 4 to 40, doing that. So it's been a beautiful spiritual path. But yeah, I would say that I am an experiencer, Sev. I wouldn't say that I am, quote, psychic. I would say, as far as psychic or anything like that, I would say I'm more empathic than anything else. I am definitely affected by the emotions of others greatly, and definitely feel the vibrations coming from other people, emanating from other people.
Yeah. And that's what makes you such a people person. Everybody loves you because you scan people and get them right away. And that's what people do. They can read people like that. Yeah. You're very good at it.
And even like a prime example was when I went to the IANS conference. I was in good health. I was fine. I spent a day and a half doing interviews, and it was like a mule kicked me in the head, energy wise. Like I was literally just overcome by the energy of all of those survivors and experiencers at that conference. The frequency was just on a different level. And it literally laid me out for like a day and a half with a migraine that would not go away. It was wild. And one of the first experiences that I'd say that really affected me in that kind of way, where it was like, wow, this is like a wave hitting me. It was pretty fascinating. My first experience, though, when I was probably about 4.5 years old. It was when I still lived out in the country of East Houston, out in Crosby, and we lived in a tiny little trailer home. The property's still there. The neighbor's house is still there. Miss Pat. I was not in school yet. My brother was, so Miss Pat would on occasion watch me during the day, things like that. I would help her gather eggs from her chickens, all kinds of stuff. But between our property and Miss Pat's property there, just before the shrub line, was like an old swing set. You know, the tetanus grabber from your childhood that your cousin had in the backyard, that like every part of the swing set is rusted from the teeter-totter to the slide, but you still use it.
I had one of those in my backyard.
Yeah,
I had
exactly.
a swing set in my backyard.
Yeah, you made it through the 70s, you know. Um, and but we had one of those. And I remember sitting up on the back of the couch and looking out at Miss Pat's property, and up against the I still, the only way I can describe it is the devil. And I mean like quintessential devil from like the side of a can of ham devil. There was a black shadowy figure with horns and a tail beckoning me to come out. That is one of literally my first most vivid memories in my life, is that shadowy creature out at the edge of the swing set beckoning for me to come outside.
So what'd you do?
Did you not? I stayed inside. I mean, I was too young to go out by myself or anything like that, but that is to this day emblazoned in my mind as one of my first memories.
Where do you
And
think
one of the
that?
first things that I remember being like truly to the depths of my soul afraid of, if you're one that believes in a soul, to the depths of my core, afraid and fearful. To this day, it's what I associate with, like, I need to go that way. When I have that feeling, I know I need to turn around. I need to go anywhere but the direction I am going. So, that was my first, what I would consider to be paranormal experience, was that.
And that didn't stop you from further investigation into the supernatural?
I don't think that at 4 years old, Seb, I don't think I
Right.
had the realization of supernatural. Like I said, the image that I saw, as far as I know, was that of what you would see on the side of a can of deviled ham. You know, a creature with a tail and horns. All that was missing was the little pitchfork, you know,
Oh, my goodness.
for the quintessential devil. So what it was, I don't know. Was it a figment of my imagination? Very well could have been. You know, I will never doubt that it very well could have been. But that does not change the experience. And it does not change the way that experience affected me for the rest of my life. And what I tie that experience to, once again, that feeling of that's the kite string pull that I know is, get the hell out of here. Like, leave
Well,
this situation.
have you come across that being again?
I've definitely come across that feeling again numerous times in my life, and at least twice in my adult life. Had very visceral experiences with shadow people, to the point where one of those experiences was waking up to a shadow person actively crawling on top of me, like grabbing my leg and trying to make its way on top of me as I was trying to wake up. So I've definitely had those experiences. I've definitely had experiences with shadowy beings since then. Whether or not they're related, I don't know. But it is definitely something that has changed and altered the way I look at things, and even changed and altered at least my faith as far as whether or not I go into a building, you know, for church. It's one of those that was very interesting. When the last one happened, it was after I was in the seminary. And they will straight warn you, like, you have decided to follow a certain path in life. Be ready for the antithesis of that path to follow you, to follow in your wake, to ride on your coattails, and to wait for its moment, because it will. And you know, it was strange and hard for me the day that I went to my spiritual director, because even after the seminary, I kept up with the spiritual director. And went and saw him bi-monthly. We talked, and I brought that situation up to him about not only the first experience with the shadow person and seeing it a couple of times in the night, and knowing that I was fully awake. I wasn't asleep. Like, I had gone to the bathroom when I saw it, things like that. And when I brought up the experience of actively being contacted by one of them touching me and coming in contact with me, his answer was, well, we don't really have a teaching on that, Chris, because there's a really big green book called the Catechism in the Catholic Church, and that has the teachings in it, and outside of that, because the church doesn't think things, it doesn't feel things, it teaches. That's it. Hands down, that's all it does. If it ain't in that big green book, we probably ain't really worried about addressing it. And it was odd for me, and it was very, I'd say, spiritually hurtful to hear what I had considered to be a very, very massively important part of my spiritual path, to tell me we don't have a teaching on that, and there's nothing we really do.
We don't have a teaching on what? Coming in contact with
shadow people, the paranormal, things like that.
Well, why didn't he just go to the whole devil place? Why didn't he say, "Oh, that's the devil," and they do have a teaching on that, don't they?
Sure. Well, and that's what and granted, he's a pretty level-headed guy. Most of them are. He didn't go down the realm of like the devil's possessing you. He didn't pull out the Roman ritual, because, well, that would have taken getting a bishop involved. They can't just grab a Roman ritual and go to work with an exorcism. That's not how that works. But at the same token, he was being very no different than me, Sev. I will hear somebody's experience and absolutely believe it prima facie. But when it comes to the facts of it, I may have to be like, I just don't know. And looking back on that now, sure. But it was one of those at the time, even the words that came out of my mouth was like, Father, you've asked me to have faith in something based on spectral evidence. And when provided evidence of the spectral, you have no answer. And that is a leap of logic that I can no longer bridge the gap of in my heart and in my soul. I can't bridge that gap. I can't have you tell me every Sunday that dark things are stalking my soul, and then when I tell you some dark thing grabbed me, you're like, I don't know. Like that's a crisis of conscience for me. That's a crisis of conscience.
I understand that.
Well, the thing is, though, Sev, is it sent me down a different path, and it sent me down a path looking for answers. It sent me down a path looking for answers in places that I had never looked. I can't say and granted, I did a lot of spiritual reading, a lot of philosophy, things like that, even after the seminary. But I started reading things like Kabbalah. I started reading, other faiths, other religions, other exorcismic documents, things like that, trying to find answers, trying to see what these things were that I had seen. What was there an answer out there? And that led me to shadow people. That led me to dimensional things, that all kinds of stuff. So had I stayed spiritually within the bounds of that church, I would not be the same person that I am today. Most definitely, And it's funny because when I look back on it throughout my whole life, thank God for my mother. I'm not even joking, Mom. If you're out there, if you listen to the link that I sent you, thank you, because I wasn't a big reader when I was a kid. I read fiction, or nonfiction. My brother read fiction. My brother was the reader. Like, he'd go to the library, get 5-6 books, and the next week go get 5-6 more. He read novels like crazy. I read books like Amulets and Talismans, which, if you go to my old junior high school library, probably still has the card in it with about 85 signatures from me on there. 85 of my initials. I read books on space travel, on astronomy, on astrology, on vampires, werewolves. Those were the things that held my attention, that fascinated me. Books on crystals, stuff like that. Books on lasers and that kind of stuff was what fascinated me. So those were the books that I checked out and read. And thank God for my mom, who was like, well, Well, I guess he got the third book on werewolves from the library. Because at 9, is that a typical thing for a 9-year-old to read? Probably not. Is that a typical thing that most parents would encourage their 9-year-old to read whenever he brings it home? Like, oh, here's a book on werewolf lore. Like, probably not. But my mom was just happy I was reading something other than a video game instruction manual for the Atari,
And
or a Dungeons and Dragons manual.
And all of that, decades and decades and decades of research and experience has led to you creating curious research.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about that.
Well, it's one of those, much like the bridge between the spiritual and the paranormal, Sev, which there's a huge one. It's the question is whether or not you can break out of a religion's spiritual box and understand the paranormal that's just on the outside of it. It's the same way with science and the paranormal, and especially right now with the world of science. Like, it is straying into the lane of the paranormal. One of my favorite images to show whenever I speak is the image of quantum entanglement, the actual image of two particles entangled via distance. It is a perfect yin yang. It's literally a yin yang. And it's like, this has been a symbol of balance and harmony for thousands of years. And science just showed that the harmonization between two atoms at a distance is that exact symbol, so that just the idea of that alone, and the idea that, like, without science, we would not have that bridge of knowledge and the point of veracity of things like the yin yang, where it's like, look, even the concept of it is pretty valid whenever you see the fact that, like, that's what it physically looks like when two things are in harmony together. It's pretty interesting. So
there's your curious research.
Absolutely.
Bridging the worlds of paranormal research and scientific endeavor.
Well, and even on the cover of the book, Seb, on the cover of the field observation and encounter log, it has the scientific method on the front. Because here's the thing, they are not that far away. Both of them, the paranormal and science, both start with the same thing: an experience and an observation. That's literally the first step of the scientific method, is experience and observation. You have seen something happen, and now you're going to start using science to break apart what happened and how it happened and why it happened. Things like that, to answer the W's of the question. And the only difference is when your experience happened to you, whatever your experience was, did you buy a ticket for the science train, or did you let it leave the station without you? Because the science started, whether you like it or not. At that point, the science started. So we've got to be ready for experiencers to talk with science, and science has to be ready for us to come over there. So that's kind of the whole reason that I made the data log was, unfortunately, many people, and this is just through sheer excitement and exuberance. It's not out of a lack of want or a lack of preparation, Sev. It's sheer exuberance that leads some folks to not write data down as it occurs in the field.
That's right.
And the fact of, do you have something in your pocket to write it down? Do you take the time to write it down? If you're the prime example I typically give is, a Sasquatcher sitting out in the woods. When you do have your experience the day you have it, do you have something in your back pocket to stop right now and write that experience down before you start walking home? Because once you leave the site and once you start walking home and you have that time to think, you're going to start passing that experience through your filters of belief, through your filters of religion, through your filters of society. And good Lord, should I even tell anybody what just happened to me? Even though I'm out here squatch hunting, should I tell anybody? This is a crazy experience, These are real questions that start happening. And the further down the line you get from the point of experience to the point of writing that down or recording that experience, the more deprecated the data gets.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and just about any, you watch the show First 48 is a great example on A&E. No plug, not involved with it. Cool show though, because it shows a murder investigation as it happens from the point of finding the body to wherever it goes. And the fact is, if they don't have facts in the first 48 hours, they may never solve that crime. And every hour that goes by, the person who witnessed it, their memory starts deprecating. Suddenly a blue shirt becomes a black one. You know, all kinds of things. And even the fact of, you know, we've talked about this on my show whenever I've had you on, Sev, the idea that even 3 people in the same room may have a totally different experience of that same paranormal experience.
Yes.
So you've got to, before y'all even start sharing your experience with each other, you need to write it down and then blindly be like, what happened to you? Now that you've written yours down, tell me what happened. Let's compare notes.
Exactly.
What happened. But
that's right.
But you've got to be ready for that when you go into the situation. You know,
I have found that it's easier to record, voice record.
Oh, sure.
Most of my life, I did not write anything down for decades.
Yeah.
It really is maybe in the last 7 years that I've really started writing things down, and I missed a lot. But one thing I've learned when I go back to read the things I wrote or to listen to the things that I recorded, there are details there that I forgot about.
Yeah.
You forget. And they're important details because they can create a timeline or they can connect the dots to some other things that were happening to you at the same time. Because you don't realize that usually there's some kind of connection going on before the experience, during the experience, and after the experience.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And the thing is, we live so much of our life, Sev, in a state of autonomic response. In a state of literal rote hypnosis. You know, if you are doing the same task every day at work, data entry off the 229 pink form at work, and that's what you do, like 3/4 of what you're doing is a rote hypnotic response. You know, your fingers know where the keys are. You don't have to look or think about it. Even driving to work, that 45-minute route that you take every day through traffic, how often do you suddenly come to and go, oh my God, I'm already here, or I'm already at this exit? Because you've entered a state of hypnosis. Just our body would much rather things just happen and not have to respond to them. You know, it's pretty fascinating the way that it will just kind of tune those things out.
You know, it's interesting you bring up driving, because I was talking with my client yesterday and I was asking her, when during the day do you feel the most creative, or do you feel the most connected to get interdimensional information? And she said, actually, one of the times that I get the most interdimensional information is when I'm driving.
Yep.
I'm like, that's good and bad.
You know, at one point, I don't write the way that I used to, but at one point many years ago, when those experiences were happening to me, I wrote a lot. Like I wrote poetry like crazy. At least 3-4 poems a week, stuff like that. And to the point that I typically carried a notebook with me, but I did delivery driving at the time, and I didn't always have time to like pull over while I was inspired. So yeah, I had a tiny little tape recorder that I carried with me. And while I would sit in Houston traffic for an hour waiting to go deliver something to a dental office, if a poem hit me, I'd pick it up and just go.
And just start talking. I didn't know you were a poet.
I've got quite a bit out there. But
I'm interested in this observation log, this field observation and encounter log. Is this for groups? Is this for individuals?
The idea is to be able to carry it in your back pocket. It's literally sized to be able to fit into the back of a blue jean pocket.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's for individual investigators out there, even folks like you who are a Mufon field investigator. Like it's because while there's a generalized and formal intake form on the website, Is there one that goes out that you can print and bring with you everywhere, where you're getting the exact same data all the time? And especially with people like Mufon, yes, there is. But when you're talking about doing paranormal investigation as a group, not always, and to have that scientific data, to have the information there, like what direction was your sighting in? What time of day did it happen? What was if you can provide the GPS location, or at least an address as to where it happened. Were there other witnesses to the event? What were their names? A section where a little gridded out section where you can actually sketch something that you saw, a spot where you can put the words, a spot where it's like, what was the temperature? What was the humidity? Things that, as you know, as a field investigator, all these things eventually come into play with the data that comes in. So hopefully amongst your group, 2 or 3 people have one of these in their pocket and they're writing it down as well. So at that point, and the cool thing is it's not like it's a spiral bound notebook where you lose pages. It's an actual bound book.
Do you have one right there?
I sure do.
Let's look at it. And how can one get it?
You can go right to curiousresearch.org.
Curiousresearch.org.
It is right there on the website, everything else.
And do you have your music there?
There's the actual inside of the field guide.
So do you have a separate form for Sasquatch, for UFO, for ET?
No.
It's all the same?
It is all the same form.
That's interesting.
All the same, because technically you're going to be looking, hopefully, for the same kind of data in science regardless. You
can also use this for orbs.
Oh, absolutely.
For people who love to go out and look at orbs, I think it's a really good idea to write down the time, the temperature, but also what mood were you in?
Yeah.
What happened to you that morning?
How did it make you feel?
To you an hour before you summoned the orb?
And what's interesting, Sev, is and I'm working on one right now for remote viewing. I'm working on one for people like me who are astrophotographers. So it's like, here's your astrophotography log. You can keep track of like the best camera settings that you've had for Jupiter, that kind of stuff. What blew my mind was when I went to make this. It was at Falk Monster Festival 2 years ago with my brother. And we saw a great presentation by somebody about, doing field work and stuff like that. And as both of us, as former youth ministers, him having owned a retreat company that worked with teens and stuff like that, we were outside having a cigarette. And it was like, how come nobody talks about how to collect data? And it got me thinking, and I was like, I can't say that I've seen a lot of presentations on that at paranormal conferences I go to, or there's a lot about like, gear that people use in the field whenever they talk, stuff like that, but nothing about like, how do we collect data so that come time for a scientist to get involved, we have proper scientific data, not just here's a picture. I took it on this date. The example I give is a picture's worth 1,000 words to anybody that's been in that circumstance. If you show a 4-year-old that has never been to a wedding reception, a picture of a wedding reception, 0 frame of reference. Welcome to the scientist looking at your picture. Without the data to go with it, it's a picture. It's not worth 1,000 words. You need to give them the 1,000 words to go with the picture, to describe everything that went into taking it, so that they have a full story. Otherwise, they just have a picture. So that got my mind churning and thinking and looking. And I spent quite a while looking and never found not just a data log for the paranormal and esoteric, Sev, but even for like phlebotomy labs. Like there are not lab manuals like this, where it's like, so you're doing generalized biological lab work. Here's some normal things you'll need, and then a spot to jot down notes from your experiment. But time, date, location, like these are normal things that you're going to need in scientific data. And you're telling me that scientists literally just scrib that out by hand every single time they do a page of data in the lab, that's mind-blowing to me. So it was one of those, if scientists aren't doing it, my God, we need to do it. Like beyond them, at least they have a method that works for them. We have zero unified method in any of these fields as to how we actively take data. You know, there's Mufon field investigator training, and they give you a fantastic layout of how to gather data, how to examine data, stuff like that. But is that a reach across the aisle? Are they sharing that with Norfolk? Stuff like that.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe. I don't. Who knows?
That's the effort that I'm trying to take part in with Curious Research, is bringing this group together with this group. How can we help each other? Because science does not happen in a bell jar. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens through collaboration. The internet that we are on right now for this show, Sev, was made for two reasons: sharing of data amongst scientific laboratories in the world of academia, and military support. Those were the first two reasons. But the first one was so that Caltech could talk to MIT and share data in real time. That's what it was made for. And we aren't using it for that. We've got numerous agencies out there with piles and reams of data that they keep behind walls and do not share with other people. And how I have to question that, because that's not actual science. It reminds me very much of the science that took place in college with my friends who were vying to go to like Chapel Hill in North Carolina for biomed and stuff like that, where it was like, dang it, somebody sabotaged my experiment again. And it was somebody amongst the 4 or 5 people who were vying for the exact same grant to go to Chapel Hill. So you had student scientists who were actively sabotaging each other's experiments so that they would get the money to go do the research. And it's like, wow, that's sadly a lot of the environment that we live in the world of the paranormal, is a competitive view of research like that, where it's like, I'm going to hoard this information and not share with other researchers because somebody else may take my glory of the years of hard work I've done on this research.
Yes.
And it's a reticent fear. And I understand it, because I saw my friends, like I said, in college go through it, where it's like, they wouldn't share their information about their experiment with anybody because somebody may either take their experiment or may come sabotage theirs. And that's kind of frightening. And it's kind of frightening to see that even that side as much boils from science, and says like, oh, science will never want to research this,
Well, I think it is researching it through the field of quantum physics.
Absolutely. And since the world of quantum physics and quantum mechanics has really come to the forefront, that is when the world of paranormal changed. That's when we started really seeing like, okay, no, let's pay more attention to UAPs instead of UFO. I am one of the people that is a big proponent of that nomenclature change, because I love UFO. I'm emotionally attached to it. Don't get me wrong. It's been UFO my whole life. But science changes, and when you're talking about trying to get science involved, you've got to pull it out of the Kleenex box that is the paranormal. And when I say Kleenex box, I mean it in the term of brand, where it's like there's 85 different tissues when you walk down the facial tissue aisle. Aloe, no aloe, lotion, no lotion, scented, unscented, brands other than Kleenex. But what do you call all of them? Kleenex.
Yeah.
Do you have a Kleenex? So the problem is that science likes to categorize. They like to know Kleenex, this brand, this type, that type. That's what science does, is categorize it. So when you just keep calling it all Kleenex, there's no possibility for categorization there. So science doesn't want to be involved. When you call it a UAP and you say aerial phenomena, well, science has to get involved with phenomena. This is literally a scientific desk reference from 1975 of strange phenomena, with things listed like ball lightning articles from the 1700s, stuff like that, so that you can eliminate the phenomena from your data set, because that's what science has to do. So they're trying to end up with a core piece of data, but they've got this anomaly inside the data.
Yes.
And you have to solve for the anomaly, otherwise your data set is not complete. So,
well, does your observation log have space for an esoteric or metaphysical experience, a paranormal supernatural experience?
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's just it. It's got a spot there for you to write down what you saw, what your experience was, things like that. And it's
Or
all
a download
paranormal.
that you got, while you're looking at something. Yeah.
Absolutely. That is what that section is for you to be able to write down exactly what happened to you during the time of your experience.
Yes, the feelings are so important.
Absolutely.
Like I said, what were you feeling before? What were you feeling during? And then how did you change the day after and the day after and forever?
That is honestly one of my favorite parts of remote viewing. I've been practicing remote viewing for about 6-7 months now. Been taking lessons from Lynn Buchanan. Great stuff. And I of course went on the remote viewing cruise. I've done sessions with them, stuff like that. But one of my favorite things about the process of remote viewing is before you start, there's a check-in that happens. And it's basically like a mind cleanser and a palate cleanser, and it's like stray cats. What are some of the random things that have just been floating around in my head today? Distractors. Me and my wife got into a fight yesterday. We haven't made up. My cat disappeared 2 days ago. I haven't seen him. Don't know where I'm going to get money for rent. Like, these are all things that are in your head distracting you, so they may be partially responsible for the filter that you're looking at your session through, so during that session, as you're talking out loud, as you're moving, as you're doing things, your monitor will be like, hey, it kind of sounds like you're going down the trail of one of your distractors. Let's pull back for a second and let's refocus on this. You said a minute ago you smelled salt air. Let's explore that, because it helps them like pull you away so that you don't go down the rabbit hole of following this thing that may be utterly unrelated to the target at hand and what the task at hand, as far as what you're doing scientifically and lab wise and, trying to get data.
And that just takes practice. Once you do this more and more and more, you're able to do that. You're able to kind of put your daily problems off to the side. It's very possible.
But and it can be hard though. It can be hard though to compartmentalize like that, Sev. So and that's something that even referring back to remote viewing and the paranormal, that's something that I speak about whenever I speak on remote viewing, is that it was originally theorized by a laser scientist. And the hypothesis that Hal Puthoff put out there was that scientists who were doing laboratory work were adversely affecting their experiments when they went home and thought about them. Now think about that for a minute, especially in the terms of quantum entanglement, things like that. The idea that you may be influencing something at a distance just by thinking about it. The idea of like, while I was in traffic, I thought, did I leave my iron on? And I thought it so many times and so hard that my iron turned on and burned my apartment down. It sounds like a Time Life thing. Like a sister in Poughkeepsie had a dream about her sister on a bus. But in all reality, it's one of those, like, it opens up for a whole world of synchronicities, why synchronicities happen, things like that. The idea that we are tapped into something all the time. The paranormal is not outside of our reality. It's adjunct to our reality.
Well, yeah,
it's right next door.
We live in it, right? And so something else that you're doing as a frequency musician is you're creating frequency and sounds and music
Yeah.
to help us get to those other dimensions, to help us connect with other beings, whether it's ETs or
Sure.
angels or spirit guides. So your newest, I have, is this the cover?
Hey, there you go. That's the cover.
The newest. That's a really, really cool cover.
Thank you.
Experiencer Music for Targeted Minds, Volume 2. So as I said in the introduction, this is designed to help relieve PTSD of contactees and also people who maybe had some other strange things happen.
Yeah.
So can you tell us why you're doing this, how you're doing it, and what are the results?
Well, the reason I'm doing it is because when you've had a paranormal event, Sev, the way I describe it is it's kind of like getting a mechanical watch near a magnet. That watch is forever going to carry part of that magnetic field unless you can find a way to demagnetize it. It will forever tell time in an altered way. And we're very much the same way. Our brains are actively transducers. They're transducers made out of salt and fat that receive all kinds of signals throughout the day. All kinds of frequencies, both audible and visible and non-audible and non-visible. But our brain still responds to them, and a lot of my work comes from the world of HemiSync, the Monroe Institute. Dr. Scott Taylor is actually a good friend. He's been on my show numerous times. We love chatting about this work because it's one of those that it really is a unique opportunity to retrain your brain. Your brain is a fully malleable part of your body and ready to be programmed and reprogrammed almost at will. And it's pretty fascinating. And there's kind of a difference between binaural beats and frequency therapy. Frequency therapy is very much like pure tone frequency. The way I explain that is like meditation bowls. A singing bowl would be an example of frequency therapy. That bowl is going to sing and resonate at an frequency, a single frequency, and it's there. And as long as you're exposed to it, yes, your frequency will respond in kind through what's called entrainment. All right. And entrainment is a principle in physics. The best way to show it is the pendulum experiment that was famously redone and proven on Mythbusters, where they take two pendulums and swing them opposite ways. And then eventually the pendulums start swinging the same way in the same time. And they'll fall out and then they'll come back. You'll see this happen all the time randomly with the blinker in front of you, where your blinker will sync up with the other blinker and then suddenly they'll fall out of sync again. Your brain wants to follow patterns. Once again, it wants to live in a state of hypnosis. It'd rather not think. So it's fascinating to see that your brain will respond to these frequencies in frequency therapy, stuff like that. The difference between frequency therapy and binaural beats is, as opposed to being exposed to the frequency and kind of like going to the spa and getting a massage with the frequency, so to speak, binaural beats is like taking your brain to the gym for the frequency. Because as opposed to having to have external give you the frequency, what happens in binaural beats is you're actively giving the two different sides of your brain offset frequencies. So frequencies that are directly around the target frequency. And because they're slightly off with each other, it creates a wobble, and your brain eventually goes, it kind of sounds like you're trying to do this. Boo, and it creates the target frequency itself. So binaural beats is actually a unique way that you can begin to train your brain to produce the frequencies it needs when it needs them. So it's pretty interesting. Yeah.
So
go ahead.
So the whole point of, engaging in the binaural beats or the hemisync is to get you to the point where you can go there like in a couple seconds whenever you need to, for whatever reason.
Exactly. And it's pretty interesting because once again, like a singing bowl, you're going to need the singing bowl, But if you use binaural beats with the same frequency, eventually your brain will begin generating those frequencies itself.
Okay, so can we put the drug companies out of business by doing this?
Good Lord, I'd love to. Uh, and it does alleviate a lot of symptomology, and that is kind of the operating principle behind the targeted series. As you saw, Experiencer is volume 2. The first one in that series is actually just called Music for Targeted Minds. And it was made for people that I've talked to on my show for years, targeted individuals, people who have suffered things like Havana syndrome, stuff like that, where they are victims of gang stalking, they are victims of brain fog, electromagnetic weaponry, things like that. So I created a formulation of binaural beats that kind of help de-traumatize people from that and help them return to a point of normal sleep, normalcy in their life, things like that, to help reduce general stressors, that kind of stuff. And it's pretty fascinating. There's a whole range of frequencies that your brain operates in: alpha, beta, gamma, delta, theta. And depending on what you're trying to do, those frequencies are peaked. So right now, as we're having a conversation and being creative, alpha waves go up. As we start to get tired and get into kind of a rote hypnotic state, theta waves will pop up. Things like that. That's associated with deep sleep, REM sleep, dream sleep, that kind of stuff. One of my favorites. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Does someone have to have experienced PTSD or be a contactee to listen to your music or benefit from it?
Absolutely
it's not dangerous.
No, not whatsoever. The only thing that's going to happen is you may find yourself with maybe a little bit more general state of well-being, and you might get a little bit better sleep out of it.
Those are big pluses. Yeah, that's what everybody wants.
The Experiencer album specifically was once again made for people who have been in close proximity with craft, people who are experiencers of the third and fourth kind of alien experience, specifically that trauma that comes along with being violated, as many people see it. And really, until you come to a point of acceptance with an experience like you beautifully have, Sev, that is all too often and sadly the experience is a feeling of violation, is a feeling of abandonment, a feeling that you have nobody that you can go to your violation to. Like, even if you see a therapist every Thursday, how do you tell them that, like, okay, well, since we saw each other last Thursday, 2 days ago, I was taken by a craft and these things experimented on me. It's like, can you tell your therapist that? Is your therapist good enough for you that you can do that they will see that as a means by which to go deeper in your life rather than to call you crazy? So these are a lot of things that come along with that. And that's taxing. That's taxing on the soul. It's taxing on the heart, and it's taxing on the mind, Sev. It can really eke into your daily life and even come to a point, as we've talked about on my show with you, the point where it comes between family, it comes between friends, it can lead to bad things.
If you allow it to, if
Absolutely.
you refuse to engage and investigate and research, it could ruin things. And so that's why I do the work I do. We do the same kind of work to help experiencers so they can see the benefits of what happened, because there's some remarkable stuff that happens in ET contact. Not just ET contact, but just traveling through the astral realms, remote viewing, coming in contact with spirit guides.
Precisely.
It's all so fascinating. And once you start doing it, you can't stop.
And the sad thing is, many people stop a lot of those other things because of another experience, and that's sad, because it can stop spiritual process. It can stop spiritual progress.
Yes.
And it can stymie a lot of things, once again, if you let it. And sadly, a lot of people do. So this album is written for those people who do.
Okay,
And
Chris, tell us how we can get your album and how we can get in touch with you and where you're going to be. What conferences are you doing? And
oh,
what else?
sure,
You
sure.
have
Yeah.
so
I
much
mean, you can
happening right
you
now.
can find all the music on Curious Research. It's right there in the store. Also in the store is tons of equipment for doing actual research out in the field.
Oh,
Everything from
good.
Geiger counters and infrared cameras
Mm.
to,
Oh, cool.
plaster cast kits and DNA sample collection kits, things like that. So the idea is, once again, to enable people with the tools of science to be able to, because it's great to have an EVP, great to have an electromagnetic
It
reader,
sure is.
like, hey, here's an EMF meter, but it goes from green to red. What do those values mean? I've never actually seen an EMF meter that comes with the directions that tells you, like, this color green is this part of the magnetic Gauss spectrum. This color orange is that, like, no, you need one with a readout so you can actually get a base level reading of the room on the magnetic frequency before you start seeing spikes and stuff,
And that's
Oh,
what you offer? You
yeah.
offer
Yeah, that's
Oh,
just it. I offer a different level of equipment where it's much more lab grade equipment than it is hobbyist equipment.
well, that is
So that
very
you can actively get
interesting.
readings, data readings, things like that. Because once again, an EMF reader that just goes from green to red gives you no actual data. It's no data. It could be responding to any spike in the room, but without the actual range of what it just went through, you don't know what anomaly it may be. You know, um,
Right.
data leads you down the paths of questions, is what it should do. And the more data you get, the more questions you should have, and the much better idea you should have coming out of it.
Mhm.
That's science, and unfortunately, there's a lot of sensationalism with a lot of these fields. You know, and sometimes that doesn't necessarily lead to the most scientific place. And we are rapidly, once again, coming to the fact that these fields in science are matching up. They are no longer competing with each other. You know,
No, that's a good
It-
way to put it. Alright, so are you going to be speaking at any conferences
I
soon?
am. I am. I just put in for about 3 different conferences today, as a matter of fact. But I know
Mhm.
my next confirmed one that I have right now is actually the Sci Games coming up in August this year, which is the first of its kind event, where it's actually kind of like a psionic Olympics, where they will have numerous events that you can participate in, from remote viewing to clairvoyance to psychokinetic ability, all kinds of things, with a great grip of people there as judges. People like Jeffrey Mishlev is going to be
Mhm.
there. Chris
Where is
Bledsoe
it?
will be there.
Mhm.
I want to say it's in Florida, if I'm not mistaken. Um, but SciGames.com, you can find out more at SciGames.com. It's great.
Right.
Really cool event being put on by a good friend, Hakeem Isler. Really cool stuff. Whenever I heard about it, I was like, this is exciting. This is not like a, and of course there will be presentations and workshops and stuff like that. But the idea that there are actual events to compete in, where it's like, who can move this pith ball inside of a bell jar with just your mind,
They're gonna
things
have a
things
race
like
or
that.
a contest?
There will be numerous
Yeah.
contests
Or is there
like
gonna
that.
be a contest to see who can summon in the biggest orb?
We'll see. We'll see, because Chris Bledsoe will be there as one of the judges. So, that'll be interesting, to say the least. Yeah, it's one of those,
Okay.
these once again, these fields are all coming together. I'm with you. Um,
Okay. It's just interesting that now
it
it's
is.
going in that direction. I
It,
never really even heard of that before. Like pitting psychic people against psychic people. Okay, this is interesting.
it's not a psychic war games now.
That's what
Um,
it sounds like.
it's like a psychic field day. Imagine like a sack race, but for your mind.
That's funny. All right, Chris Jordan, it's been a pleasure.
Always
Thank
a
you
pleasure, Seth.
so very
Always.
much.
I love
Thank
the
you,
time we spend together.
everybody. Yeah. You're a great guest.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. And please check out Chris Jordan's. What is your email? I mean, excuse me, what's your store?
Curiousresearch.org/store.
Okay. Yeah, please check that out. I'm interested in the DNA kit that you're selling. I find that very, very interesting.
Oh, yeah. Tons of great stuff on there.
Yeah. So when you come in contact with an ET, or when you have
Implant.
a mark on your body, you know, geometric mark. Sometimes we wake up with a geometric mark on our body. Do you suggest that we take a DNA swab of that part? What do you suggest we do with a mark?
I would definitely say, A, pictures. You can't get enough pictures of something like that, proper pictures of it. Preferably with an actual camera, not your phone if you can. Because as you know, Sev, there are some algorithmic things that go on in your phone to try to create the best picture for you as you're shaking and stuff like that. And those can sometimes lead to artifacts, you know, that aren't actually there. So an actual still camera is best. I would also say, if you can, definitely try to get a DNA swab of that. And if you can bear it, even a small ramekin, you know, like what they give you, like dipping sauce in at a restaurant, something like that. But a ramekin and like a butter knife, something like that, to actually scrape a few skin flakes off. Because at that point, you know, you could have actual residue on your body. You could have residue from something on your skin, things like that may not be picked up by a general DNA swab. So being able to have that, I think, is a great idea as far as future research goes. Aside from that, you know.
Yeah, thank you for providing that. I
absolutely.
That's a really wonderful thing to provide for everybody. And I think this observation and encounter log that you've created is great too, because I haven't seen another one like that. And the only I know I said goodbye to everybody 5 minutes ago, and I keep on talking, but this is what it's like when you talk to Chris. Now I completely forgot what I was going to say. I completely forgot what I was going to say.
You were talking about the experience log.
When I was first learning how to engage with an experiencer through Mufon, I was taught through Mufon how to take samples. But I was only taught through Mufon. I never came across any other organization or group who taught me anything like that.
Yeah, because
you're doing it.
Well, they came up with scientific protocols many years ago, and that is one thing I will always say, despite what anybody says about MUFON out in communities, I will always say that for the last 50 years, as far as nuts and bolts science goes, they probably have the greatest data trove of things out there, because
they're pretty specific.
They have taken the time to come up with specific scientific protocol. Even the idea of the STAR team, of like, once something hits this point, it goes to these people to go get sample collections of the dirt, everything else, you know, local environment, that kind of stuff, because those are the points of datum that you need for science, you know, like experience is once again where the process starts. You can never get rid of the experience. And here's something very important, Sev, before we do go, is please, experiencers, take this to heart and understand there's a lot of things that pop up out there in the world that are strange, all right, that look strange, that seem strange, especially if you're untrained in a camera. You know, if you're untrained, like Seb at one point was, but isn't now, you know how to spot things in the sky and recognize the difference between a satellite and a star, and a planet and a star, that kind of stuff, because of the training you've had. So I am somebody that says more red circles, please, for the sake of science, give us more pictures with red circles. All right. Because the red circles give us something to examine. Now, here's the thing. if what is in that red circle becomes explained, that does not remove your experience. That does not remove the way taking that picture made you feel. That doesn't change that. That doesn't change the way it changed you as a person just because what is inside of that red circle is explained.
That's a wonderful way to put it, Chris.
And
yes,
we as scientists, we as science-minded people need to want more red circles, not be mad at people who bring us red circles, because the more red circles we solve, the greater the data set is for the known quantitative and the more narrowed down the anomaly becomes. That's science. So we need more red circles, and we need people who present them to understand that nobody's trying to crush your experience. It doesn't change your experience when something in the red circle is shown to be something different than what you believe it is. All right?
Yes.
That's the bridge that we need to build between the community of science and experiencer, is that understanding of the red circle and the fact that we need more of them so that we can figure out the problem, but you also need to be willing to accept what's in the red circle when provided with it.
Yes.
So it's a twofold problem coming from both sides of the bridge to meet in the middle, Seth.
Yes.
And that's hugely important.
Very well said. Thank you, Chris. Okay. This is the definitive goodbye. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.